An elderly woman was sitting in a McDonald's restaurant. She had only ordered a coffee and was quietly staring out the window. A rude manager approached and began asking her to leave, saying that she needed to order something more if she wanted to stay, that a coffee wasn't enough. This situation won't leave anyone indifferent, because the one who stood up for this grandmother was Keanu Reeves himself. What he did will make your heart skip a beat. Friends, let us know in the comments under what conditions you watch this video. In the background, while working, or during lunch. Also, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow another emotional story will be waiting for you. It was cold. An icy wind swept through the streets of a small town in California, nearly blowing the hats off pedestrians. Even the usually bright sun seemed powerless. Its rays pierced through the clouds, but offered no warmth. It was one of those winter mornings that looked calm on the outside, but something heavy lingered in the air, as if the town itself was holding its breath. On the corner of the main street stood a McDonald's, an ordinary, unremarkable fast food restaurant. Inside, as always, life bustled. Young employees in branded uniforms bustled between the registers, pouring coffee, setting out sauce packets, greeting customers with automatic smiles. It was still early, a time when regular morning guests filled the space. A few office workers, taxi drivers, seniors who came in for coffee and sat quietly, as if simply running from loneliness. By the large window, where you could see the cars slowly crawling down the street, sat a woman, an elderly woman. She looked to be over 75. Her coat was old, faded, with a slight patina of time on the collar, but it was clean. A knit hat covered her gray hair tightly, and her face, though wrinkled, was kind. She held a small paper cup of coffee in her hands, already cold, and she just sat there, looking out the window. Her lips moved slightly, as if she were remembering something, speaking to herself in silence. There was nothing on the table in front of her but that cup. She wasn't eating. She wasn't reading. She wasn't using a phone. She was simply there. A quiet presence most didn't notice. But not all. In the far corner, where those who wanted peace usually sat, was a man in a gray baseball cap, a black jacket, and dark sunglasses. He had a laptop in front of him, but wasn't typing. From time to time, he glanced at the elderly woman. His look was not casual, not curious. It was observant. That man was Keanu Reeves. He looked calm, even tired, as always. Not like a celebrity, but like someone who simply wanted to be left alone. But something about this morning changed him. Keanu had come to this town incognito for a few days to get away from the noise. He did that often. Booked a hotel room, stopped by the nearest McDonald's for a coffee, and just sat among ordinary people, as if trying to feel the life he'd long been missing. And that's exactly why he noticed what others didn't. Two employees, a young man and a girl, whispered behind the register. The guy nodded toward the elderly woman, grimacing like she was something unpleasant. Then they exchanged a few words with the manager, a young man around 25, in a red sweater with a name tag that read, "Shift Supervisor." The manager shrugged, but eventually approached the table by the window. People nearby, two women with kids and another man, turned away, pretending they heard nothing. Someone even shrugged, as if to say, "Well, what can you do?" The manager stopped by the elderly woman and leaned down slightly, as if speaking to a child. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but if you're not ordering anything else, we're going to have to ask you to vacate the table. This isn't a shelter, it's a restaurant. People are waiting. You understand?" His voice was quiet, but there was indifference in it, mechanical politeness without a drop of humanity. The elderly woman looked up at him. Her eyes were gray, tired, but calm. She nodded, placed the cup on the table, didn't say a word, and slowly began to gather her things. She stood with difficulty, bracing herself on the edge of the table because her legs didn't cooperate. Keanu was still sitting in the corner, but now his expression had changed. His lips pressed together. His fingers twitched slightly. He already knew this story would not end for him with just coffee and a quiet exit. Something in this scene hurt. Something in the woman's posture, in her silence, went deeper than just a cold morning. And he felt it. This was only the beginning, and it would get worse. No one knew yet that this moment was the start of something important. Something that would make an entire town fall silent and set the internet ablaze. The elderly woman slowly reached for her old canvas backpack lying at her feet. Her movements were slow, as if every effort cost her pain she hadn't spoken of in years. She nodded to the young man in the red sweater, avoiding eye contact. I'm leaving, she whispered. Her voice was thin, almost inaudible. There was no protest in it, no anger, just anxiety mixed with shame, as if she were apologizing for simply existing. Then please hurry up, the employee said louder. His voice cut through the air of the restaurant like a blade. People nearby lifted their heads. One man even raised his eyebrows and nodded as if to say, "Finally." Someone said it. "This isn't a library, ma'am. You're not ordering anything. Just sitting here. This place is for customers, not for loitering. We've seen you here more than once," the manager continued, now even louder. Tension filled the room. Someone seemed to hold their breath. Others began whispering. "What's the big deal?" came a voice from a woman at the next table. "She got a coffee, sat a bit. So what? Let her be." "She's not buying anything," someone else replied. "This isn't a shelter." A few patrons stared at the elderly woman. One teenager pulled out his phone and started recording. His friend giggled, covering his mouth. "Always the same thing," muttered a taxi driver at a nearby table. "They come in, take up space, and then act surprised when they're asked to leave." The elderly woman fumbled nervously with her backpack. Her hands trembled. She tried to say something, but only a raspy breath escaped. Tears welled up in her eyes, ones she fought desperately to hold back. She leaned toward the table, picked up her cup, and tossed it into the nearby trash bin. Keanu had seen everything. He closed his laptop and pushed aside his coffee. His gaze never left the elderly woman. Her shoulders were shaking as she walked past other customers, who either looked away or eyed her with disdain. "Look at her run off," someone scoffed. "Now she's offended." "Maybe she needs help," a young man said quietly, but his words were drowned in the murmur of the room. Someone else managed to record her as she exited the restaurant, bundled tightly in her coat, as if trying to hide from the world. The video had already started spreading across social media. Some laughed at it, others were outraged, but most remained silent. Keanu was not silent. He stood up decisively, pulled his baseball cap lower over his forehead, and followed the elderly woman out. A wave of emotion hit him like a tide. His thoughts vanished. He followed her. Because he knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Keanu stepped out into the cold air, which instantly bit at his skin, as if to remind him, real life began outside the warmth of a restaurant. He scanned the street and almost immediately spotted her. The elderly woman was slowly making her way down the sidewalk, leaning on an old cane. Her posture was hunched, her movements careful, as if each step might be her last. He caught up with her at a bus stop. She stood by the bench, holding the same worn backpack in her hands. There was no one else around, just an old, swaying advertisement sign in the wind and a gray ticket machine box that clearly hadn't worked in ages. "Excuse me," Keanu spoke gently, not wanting to startle her. "Are you all right?" She flinched and turned. Her eyes were red, but she quickly dabbed the corners with a handkerchief, trying to preserve her dignity. "Yes, I'm fine," she answered softly. "Just a little cold. Thank you for asking." I saw what happened in the restaurant. It wasn't right. His voice was soft but firm. "May I walk with you? Buy you another coffee if you don't mind." She hesitated. It was clear she felt uncomfortable, but something in his tone, calm, genuinely kind, allowed her to relax a little. She nodded. That's very kind of you. But you don't need to waste your time on me. I'm used to it." "Used to what?" Keanu asked gently. She sighed deeply and looked down at her hands. Her fingers were wrinkled, slightly swollen from the cold. "I go to that McDonald's every day, have been for months. Not to eat. Just to sit somewhere warm. My place is cold. No furnace, and the old space heater keeps shutting off. I can't afford high utility bills. My pension goes to rent and medicine. I leave a little for food, of course. But heating, that's a luxury." She dropped her gaze. "I buy the smallest coffee. Always. I sit by the window, just watching. People, cars, the sky. Sometimes I think about the past, about music." "You're a musician?" Keanu leaned in slightly, intrigued. "I used to be." A faint smile touched her lips, though her eyes remained sad. "I taught music in school for over 30 years. Played piano. I once dreamed of opening a little studio. But then there were cuts. They merged the schools. Older teachers were forced to retire, no choice. And since then, everything went downhill." Keanu stayed silent. He listened attentively, and that, more than any words, touched her deeply. "I have 2 children," she continued, "but they have their own lives, their own problems. I don't want to be a burden. I don't call. I don't ask for anything. They've got enough to deal with. I last saw my grandkids on Christmas, 2 years ago." She wrapped herself tighter in her coat, but it was clear. It wasn't the cold that frightened her. It was loneliness. "That coffee by the window, it's my little ritual. The only warm part of my day. Sometimes I imagine someone's waiting for me, that someone will sit down and say, 'I'm glad you're here. It's good to see you.'" Her voice cracked, and she wiped her tears again with her handkerchief. But this time, she couldn't hide them all. Keanu stepped a little closer and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "May I sit with you? Right now. No coffee. No restaurant. Just so you know, I'm glad you're here." The words came simply, without theatrics. But for her, they meant more than any donation, more than any pity. She nodded, unable to reply, and in that moment, on a cold winter morning, among indifferent streets, between a bus stop and an old ad sign, there was the warmest connection between 2 people who were never meant to meet, but had to, because someone, up above, knew it was time. Keanu stood silently as the elderly woman gently wiped her tears, but something was changing in his eyes. With every word she spoke, every wrinkle on her face, every quiet memory she shared, a fire was building inside him. Not a hot, impulsive fire. A cold, steady anger born from the realization of deep injustice. He felt that he had to do something. Not just talk, not just sympathize, but truly change the situation. "You know what?" he finally said. "Let's go back. You shouldn't have to leave that place in tears. I want you to sit by that window again with a coffee. And this time, no one will bother you. I promise." She tried to protest, but he simply smiled and offered her his hand. Together, they slowly made their way back to the restaurant. And although it was still bitterly cold outside, the air seemed to carry something different now. Something stronger than the winter wind. Inside the McDonald's, the usual hustle continued, but when the door opened, and Keanu walked in with the elderly woman. The atmosphere shifted. Heads turned. Some whispered in surprise. Others just watched in silence. Keanu didn't seek attention, but he didn't avoid it either. He confidently walked to the counter, bought 2 coffees, and returned with her to the same table by the window. She sat down, still a little tense, but a slight tremble in her lips gave way to a small, genuine smile. At that moment, the same manager approached. He stopped halfway, visibly nervous as he recognized Keanu's face. "Excuse me, sir," he began, but Keanu raised his hand. "Sit down." His voice was calm, but so firm it cut through the air. The manager sat at the edge of the seat, trying to maintain composure. "Do you know who this woman is?" Keanu asked. "No, sir. I don't. She's a former music teacher. She taught children for 30 years. And now she's forced to warm herself in a restaurant over the cheapest cup of coffee. Because her home is cold. Because she's been forgotten. Because your company sees people like her as a burden." The manager remained silent, waiting. "And do you know what I'm going to do?" Keanu pulled out his phone and began recording without hesitation. "This is Margaret. She taught music, raised 2 children. Today, she was thrown out of this restaurant for sitting too long with a coffee. She was kicked out, publicly, humiliated, because someone decided she was taking up space, that she had no right to warmth." He stopped recording, looked into the camera, and added, "Now tell me, what kind of America do we live in, if this is how we treat those who've spent their lives helping others?" He posted the video on his social media immediately, with the caption, "Warmth is a human right." And within moments, comments began flooding in. "Can't stop crying. My grandma is the same. This hurts. McDonald's? Care to explain?" Within just a few minutes, Keanu's post had been shared thousands of times. People were angry. People were thankful. People felt something. What had just been one woman's quiet tragedy became a voice for thousands. The manager said nothing more. He simply stood up and walked back to the counter. Meanwhile, Keanu leaned toward Margaret and said, "We're going to fix this. Not just once. Not with a handout. For good." The next day, the elderly woman was sitting in a different place, a cafe that supports seniors. Keanu had arranged for her to be part of an assistance program. Hot meals, covered housing, support. But more importantly, he personally gave her his number. And he said, "You're not alone anymore. And you'll never have to shiver from the cold again. Not in body, not in spirit." A few days had passed. The cold hadn't let up. But in one small McDonald's in California, things felt warmer. Not because of heaters, not because of coffee, but because of an atmosphere that had completely changed. That morning, Keanu was once again sitting at the window table. Across from him sat Margaret. She wasn't holding a tiny cold coffee this time, but a full lunch tray. A burger, fries, an apple pie, and a large coffee with cream. She was laughing, a real open laugh she hadn't felt in years. Her face radiated life. "You really never met Bill Murray?" she asked, eyeing Keanu playfully with mock suspicion. "Maybe, but that's better discussed over coffee," he replied, giving her a wink. Just then, a familiar young man approached, the same restaurant employee who just days earlier had dismissively asked Margaret to leave. His posture was completely different now. He held a small box of homemade cookies in his hands. "Ms. Margaret," his voice was quiet, "I recognized you, and I want to apologize. I wasn't thinking. I was just tired and upset. I didn't see you for who you were. I had no right to speak to you like that. I'm sorry." Margaret looked at him silently, then smiled and took the box. "Thank you for coming. You have no idea how much this means." The young man took a breath, then added, I talked to my grandma, and I started volunteering at the local senior center. They have a kitchen that prepares meals every day. I signed up to help there. And you know what? For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. That's wonderful, Keanu said. That's how real change starts. Meanwhile, the video of Margaret had reached over 20 million views. It had aired on television, was discussed on podcasts, and quoted across media. McDonald's issued an official statement. They apologized and announced the launch of a new initiative, Warm Table, a program allowing seniors to spend time in restaurants without needing to make a purchase. Every location now had special tables with signs that read, "This seat is for warmth. You are welcome to just be." Comments continued flooding Keanu's video. I'll never walk past an elderly person in a cafe again. My mom's a teacher too. This story broke my heart. Thank you, Keanu. You're not just an actor. You're a human being. Margaret sat by the window. Now she had more than just coffee. She had warmth. She had companionship. She had dignity. She looked out the window, where the world bustled beyond the glass, and softly whispered, "Sometimes the warmest place isn't home. It's just somewhere they don't ask you to leave." Keanu looked at her, his smile soft, but deep. "But now you have both, a home and warmth," he said. And they sat quietly again, two people who were no longer strangers. Because real stories, they don't happen in movies. They happen right here, outside the window, in a cup of coffee, and in words that change the world. Sometimes we can change someone's world with just one action. This story isn't just about an elderly woman and a celebrity. It's about all of us, about how often we walk by without thinking, about how easy it is to humiliate someone when we forget to look deeper, and how important it is just to see the person, a real one, with a past, with pain, with a right to dignity. Each of us can be the hand that doesn't push away, but lifts up. Because warmth isn't only about temperature, it's about humanity. Don't look away. Protect those who are vulnerable. Remember your grandparents. Even if they're silent, they still need your voice. Write in the comments how old you are and what you would do if you saw an elderly woman with a coffee being asked to leave. Be sure to share your impressions of the story in the comments and write what conclusions you have drawn after listening to it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I wish you all a good mood and see you in the new video tomorrow.